Thanks, Andy. Yes, it is indeed raining. It is tipping it down. It's horrible weather here on stage 2 of the Giro d'Italia. We had a breakaway that went very, very early on indeed. Around the 19th kilometre, we had a 3-minute gap. Andrea Fedi of Neri Sottoli, the 23-year-old in there. Jeffrey Romero, the man you saw in your picture a moment ago in the black for Team Columbia. The Belkin rider in the green and black there, covered up under all of that rain gear, is the very, very experienced Martin Cialinghi, the 37-year-old. That's the aforementioned Fedi in the light yellow. Adam joining them in the red. I'm sure he'll roll onto our picture in a minute. Sander Armé, who is the Belgian rider from Lotto Belisol. Andrea Fedi, the virtual Maglia Rosa, but I don't think he's going to arrive in today. It's a fairly flat run on. We've got two intermediate, we've got an intermediate sprint upon me and two King of the Mountains climbs. First of those coming up at Cushendall Road. That's coming up in around 10 kilometres time. Now behind the Maglia Rosa, the Titanic Svein Tuft, who took that pink jersey yesterday. Orica Greenedge, no surprise, controlling the race for him, just letting things go. The gap was allowed to go to about 6.5 minutes. I think we're talking 5 minutes and 28 now. Again, don't take too much notice of that virtual standing, because today, Sean Kelly, I think we're expecting a sprint, aren't we?
I definitely think so. Weather conditions might change a bit as we get into the final. We see here still over 100 kilometres to go, but horrible conditions out there. And that's the way it's been since they left Belfast this morning. One moment we'll have a nice bit of sunshine, then suddenly it clouds over, down the rain comes, and we can see out on course, I think they're getting more bad conditions than we are getting here at the finish. And we can see there's been a number of crashes already. Not surprised at all if we see a lot more crashes at the end of this one, because there is some technical run into Belfast. Street furniture, there's quite a lot in the final 7 or 8 kilometres, and we can see the road conditions not nice at all.
Well, we've seen a problem for Alan Marangoni a little earlier on. The man on your picture now is Davide Malacarne. He's the Europe car rider, the Italian. And a big crash, the biggest crash we've seen so far today, involved another Italian rider. Riding for Katusha, who were pretty unlucky yesterday. Joaquim Rodriguez not too happy with his team, losing a bit of time already on stage 1 to his big general classification contenders. And his important man in the mountains, or one of them at least, Gianpaolo Caruso of Katusha, crashed pretty hard, didn't he, Sean? We saw it was a nasty hit at the surface, but luckily we've heard he's back on his bike, but not the real start that Joaquim Rodriguez and Katusha were looking for this week.
No, certainly not the thing for the team, not good for morale. But yeah, sometimes we see the riders go down, they just stay down for a while, but nothing serious. At least he's back on his bike, so it cannot be too bad. But again, you know, you could get a lot of bruising. You could get, you know, maybe if you slide a bit, road rash. Although the wet conditions, you don't get that much road rash because you don't get as burdened as much. But hopefully he's not suffering too much. But it's going to be very nervous times, I think, when we're having crashes well over 100 kilometres from the finish. When we get into that final 50, 60 kilometres of the finish, it's going to get so nervous, and everybody is going to be so tense out here in the final, just to stay out of crashes and to keep their leaders out of trouble.
Well, you mentioned road rash, you mentioned the tense nature. I can tell you it would have been a horrible atmosphere on the Garmin Shark bus yesterday. I know that many of you are watching. For those of you who missed stage 1, perhaps tuning into this Giro d'Italia for the first time, well, poor Dan Martin, talked up as one of the big favourites for this Giro d'Italia. Starting on home roads in Ireland, so much preparation. He's missed so many race days to be ready for this race. Around 15 minutes in, he hit a manhole cover, crashed to the ground, took a few of his teammates with him. Now, we hear that Dan Martin is going to have surgery in Dublin tomorrow night. Is that correct?
Tonight, actually.
Tonight.
This afternoon, tonight. It looks like that. It's a break, a clean break, as you say. There's no shattering of the collarbone. That's what I've been hearing, and there was talk about going for an operation in Dublin tonight, because here in Belfast they'd not be able to do it immediately. And of course, time is vital. They want to get the operation done. It has to be done, it seems, and get it over with. And he should be back on his bike 2 weeks, and I presume the Tour of France will be his objective now. But you know, a big blow for Dan again. We see him in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, crashed out in the very final metres of that one. Yesterday was so unfortunate, because that manhole cover, there was a lot of riders, and we spoke to some of the people out on the road who were on that section. They said when the Royals went through, you could see the bike moving a bit. Dan, maybe he was just maybe a little bit getting ready for that car that were coming into the right-hander, and just got the angle a little bit and slid it out. And of course, the time trial bikes, disc wheels, everything is so rigid, you can slide out so easily.
Well, he wasn't the only man hurt in Garmin colours yesterday. Koldo Fernandez de la Rea had a problem too. He's also broken his collarbone, so Garmin 2 men down. Koldo Fernandez did finish yesterday, but he actually finished outside the time limit as well. We're wondering whether the organisers would have a little pity on anybody who finished out, but as it is, Koldo Fernandez injured, can't carry on. And if Garmin are looking to bounce back straight away with Tyler Farrer today in a possible sprint, then they've already been dealt a blow, because Koldo Fernandez would have been a big lead-out man for him.
Well, he would be a key man within Garmin and Sharp to lead out the sprint for Tyler Farrar. Unfortunately, he's out as well. And I think going back to yesterday, we did see him coming in. He was holding his collarbone. If he had, been in a position to go on today, I think, they would have had a talk with the commissars, and he probably would be allowed in when you consider the situation. But unfortunately, collarbone broken, nothing you can do, just out of the race also.
A very happy birthday for this man yesterday. Svein Tuft, 37 years of age, comes from British Columbia in Canada, from Langley to be precise. Of course, the 9th of the 5th, 1977 he was born, but he'll always remember the 9th of the 5th, 2014. That's the day he dressed in pink. Leader of the Giro d'Italia, a dream for him. What a gift. It was his 8th victory as a member of the Orica Green Edge team, his 3rd season with them, but the first victory, of course, in a team time trial this year for him. And a very strong rider, and a rider who's worked so hard for other riders throughout his career on the flatter stages. And it's nice to see those sorts of riders get their just desserts and just rewards after working for so long. 99 kilometres to go. We're off for a quick commercial break. Stay with us here on Eurosport Cycling for the Giro d'Italia. Wind could have possibly been a factor today along the coast. The rain and the wind have come together. It is an awful day for the likes of Gorka Izagirre there on your picture, and the rest of the professional peloton. Already 2 riders down after day 1. A few injuries as well that we didn't talk about in the Garmin team. Poor Nathan Haas took a lot of skin off his shoulder yesterday in that crash with Fernandez and Dan Martin, who we've talked about. And of course, Andre Cardoso, he'll be looking to recover for the mountains, the Portuguese climber, rider for Garmin Sharp. Breakaway, been away for just under the 3 hours that we've ridden. Men out there on your picture. The man in green at the front is of the Belkin team, Martin Cialinghi, 37 years of age. 6th season with this team. 3rd Giro d'Italia for him. No win on a Grand Tour. Hasten to add, it most probably isn't going to come today. A lot of teams interested in the sprint. Before we get to that, we're going to have the 2 GPMs, King of the Mountains points to be dished out. And of course, for the first time in this Giro d'Italia, the jersey, the blue jersey for the King of the Mountains, the Maglia Azzurra. In the red there from the helicopter shot, you can see Sander Almey, 28 years of age, Belgian rider from Louvain. 2 wins at the Tour de Bretagne a few years ago. His only wins on the professional cycling circuit. Come back in 2009. And we're back with the peloton. Orica Green Edge again controlling. Looking ahead to today, Sean, we've got Orica Green Edge riding at the front. Very close behind them, Giant Shimano. That's because they have the big favourite if it does come down to a big sprint, and that's Marcel Kittel. Nobody can really live with him on his day.
Well, you'd not expect anybody to live with him, considering his results this season and of past season. The Tour of France, of course, he was just on fire there, and I don't see anybody really touching him. And they have committed. They have a man there in front with the Orica Green Edge riders. He's doing a little bit of the riding, so they're keeping control on this one. And our 4 leaders out in front, it's not going to happen for them. The control is on, and it looks like it's going to be a big bunch sprint again today. But how big will that bunch be in the final? That is the question. And looking at the conditions out there at the moment, if we get anything like the conditions we're seeing now, well, it's going to be a hectic final. And this final 30-40 kilometres is going to be hectic.
39.9 kilometres per hour is the average race speed so far. The peloton not exactly motoring on behind, but they're keeping this gap controlled. It's very much well in reach at the minute. 5.5 minutes. First King of the Mountains climb to come. That's up at Cushendall Road. Comes in around 4 kilometres time for the breakaway. Now, Sean, I know you're up here riding the course on a Sportif event last weekend. How much of the circuit did you do around Belfast, and did you ride the climbs?
Well, They did 140 kilometres.
That's enough then.
Not all on the circuit, because we started here in Belfast. We went out to Ballymena, which was the road the race went out today, but then they went further down the coast, where we took the more direct route across to the coast and back in. But I did do the last 40 kilometres of the route, and that is spectacular. Unfortunately today, with the conditions, it did not look as good on our pictures on TV, but for the riders, I think the wind condition is not going to be as great, because with the rain there, the wind has died down a bit today. But again, the wet conditions, you just never know. Sometimes it can blow up at just at the time when they're coming through that area. The final is going to be very, very fast. Always in the big tour, the first days, the stages are really fast in the end. Everybody is feeling good. There's a lot of guys feel they can do something in the sprint here, where you get a week into the race, they're starting to get tired. They're not really bothered in the big one sprint. But here today, I think there's a lot of guys, and of course the conditions is going to make it very nervous for everybody.
A lot of sprinters involved. We got a brief glimpse of the Omega Pharma quick step rider there going back to talk to the car. There could be a special moment here, as there's a change of gloves there. Not always easy to get them on and off. Thick weather today. We actually saw Bernie Eisel going out, you and I, this morning. Not looking forward to the day on the bike, and he had some big thick rain gloves on. Everybody's dressed for the weather today. And as a bike rider, even though this is the first real stage of the Giro d'Italia, the real road stage, what does it do to your morale when you're sitting in the bus and you see the rain teeming down outside the windows?
Well, of course, the first day is in a big tour. Everybody is nervous, and you put the rain in, the conditions, not nice, and then it makes it a bit more nervous again. But we did talk to Bernie Eisel there. He was well wrapped up, but he's a rider who can support the conditions we're getting here today very well. There's a lot of the other riders who will suffer a bit more, and we've seen just the front end of the peloton there, a lot of guys with the big winter gloves, and that's the way you've got to do it. I think the way they're riding along in the peloton at the moment, you have to wrap up well, keep warm for as long as possible, and then when you're out on the road, if the racing starts very early on, 60-70 kilometres to finish, you can easily discard the gloves, the rain jacket. But if you're cold earlier on, well, then you're never going to really warm up, and you can suffer so much in the end.
Teams riding on the front include Orica Greenedge. Well, it's a two-pronged reason for riding for Orica Greenedge. Of course, they want to honour the pink jersey, they want to protect it and look after it. It's faint tough. But you talked about the sprint. If Marcel Kittel, for some reason, doesn't get into a big bunch sprint here, and we've got a reduced group, then Orica Greenedge have one of the real candidates to win in Michael Matthews, who's on red-hot form.
Yes, I think they're really at the moment winning the team time trial yesterday, taking the pink jersey. Morale is going to be rocket high, and with Matthews riding so well, he's in good form. I think he's capable of doing a good finish today, and this final for him, I think he will be very much up there, and they will want to hold on to the jersey, of course. And when you look at the general classification, there's a few riders like Pataki, for example, who was very close as a sprinter, but I think within Greenedge they could hold on to the pink jersey today, and there's no guarantee the sprinters will get up in the final here, so they will just work and control the race, and that's what they've got to do as a team with race leader. You've got to do that anyway, and then see what you can do in the end.
Well, if Pataki's got gloves like those, he might be a little more preoccupied with that than setting up the sprint. But on a side note, for Pataki, for neutral fans and fans of cycling, 40 years of age now, we don't know if he's going to come back to the Giro again next year. To see him win the stage and to see him in pink will be a great sight for cycling fans today.
Well, it would be a dream for Pataki to win the stage and get into the leader's pink jersey. Unfortunately, if the weather conditions continue as we're seeing at the moment, I don't think he will be too comfortable in the end, because as you get older, you're always making the calculation. You're not prepared to take as much risk, and I think there's a lot of people out there will be prepared to take the risk on the wet roads here. And the final as well, this final corner very close to the finish, 400 metres. It's not something that Pataki is, really good at. I think a long straight finish of maybe 2-3 kilometres, that's where he can put up a really good sprint. So I'd be surprised if we see Pataki taking a stage victory. Certainly when we have Kittel here, it's going to be a difficult one for him.
Well, thanks to our Eurosport colleague Magnus Begstedt, who's just informed us that those gloves, the reason they were so hard to get on and off, the scuba diving gloves. They're all made of neoprene. They're called glacier gloves, apparently, and they keep your hands very warm. So hence the reason they were going to all that trouble to try and keep them on and get them off and change them. Back with the breakaway in the meantime. We're approaching that first climb. Talked about Cilingi and Alme out there. The man on the right-hand side is in an luminous yellow jersey. As you've seen, a problem. Looked as though somebody's gone into the ditch there. A little further up, but a back wheel problem here. If you just carry on with the camera as well, there's another Movistar rider. I'm not sure whether it was a natural break or a time to have a look at mechanical things. I think it was the former. Good to see so many people out on the road, camping, getting there however they could. And here's the climb, the first climb of this Giro d'Italia. First classified climb, 2 kilometers to go until the top of it. Of course, in a group like this, on a day like this, do you think they're going to contest it, or will they just roll on and through, and whoever takes the points, Sean?
Well, I would not be surprised if we see them contesting it, because with the advantage they have at the moment, you know, they can go on and contest the second mountain classification of the day. But you know, when you're out there, if you mark maximum points here, well then, you know, you could find yourself, depending on how far they can stay out, be in the mountain jersey, and that's very important for the team and for the rider.
Well, there's Andrea Fedi at the front, 23 years of age, riding for Neri Sottoli, or Yellow Flow, as they were known until the sponsor came along. Yellow Flow referring to their colours, their fluorescent colours. No wins in his career so far. He was fourth, though, in Stage 5 of the Tour of Turkey last week, the stage that went into the holiday resort of Bodrum. The one man we haven't really talked about in the break so far, Jeffrey Romero, 24 years of age, from Colombia, from Sagamoso. Hasn't raced since Brabantse Pijl in Belgium, and another rider who's yet to take a professional win. Breakaway job today, and for teams like Colombia and like Neri Sottoli, getting in a breakaway already means that it's a fairly decent day, doesn't it?
Well, I think something we would be expecting. If there was going to be a breakaway, well then the teams which we mentioned, always, you know, present up in the breakaway, they seem to, you know, really go out and try and get to the breakaways in the earlier part of the race. And I suppose it's just to thank the organisers for getting into the race first of all, but also to highlight their sponsors.
Fedi at the back, on the wheels, and here we go. He's going to have a sprint. It will be contested indeed. Cilingi is the man on the left-hand side who's going to go for him. And a bit of early action on stage 2 of the Giro d'Italia. Andrea Fedi and Neri Sottoli will want to repay the faith that was placed in them by the organisers with the invitation after all the problems of last year. It looks as though, though, that Martin Cilingi at the minute is going to take the lead on this chase for those points. Looked as though they started the sprint quite a way out there as well, Sean.
Yes, they certainly started a long ways out, and we can see it's, you know, going to come back together here again. Cilingi, you know, tried to just have a go there, but the others were not allowing him to, you know, to ride away, and it's going to be, you know, a sprint and a contested one, because we've seen here already they go in the attack very early.
Messages for Dan, such a shame that Dan Martin isn't riding today. There was that attack, kilometre from the line, I think it was as well. Well, it's one way to light the race up. We knew they would try, Neri Sottoli, and hats off to them. Rider at the back as well, Jeffrey Romero. If he has true Colombian DNA in him, then he'll be a man wanting to go for things in the mountains. And it is Cilingi at the minute. There you can see the latest banner. Well, that was that attack again, pardon me. Back onto the live. Here we go, into the last few hundred metres of this first climb of the day. All the way up to Cushendall Road, it's 261 metres above sea level. In fact, it's the highest point on the stage today. Fourth category. So no more than a handful of points. Sander Arme isn't going to contest it. It's Cilingi at the front in the green. On the right-hand side in the yellow, pulling off. Andrea Fedi's not going to do it. Cilingi then up against Romero. Cilingi will ride through. He'll take the maximum points with Romero just behind him. King of the Mountains competition well underway.
Yes, and very hotly contested. We see there was a kilometre to go. They started going in the attack, and all four were trying here, as we can see here. You know, they were hoping that they would be able to contest it, but Cilingi, we could see earlier on, he looked to be quite strong and was the strongest right to the summit.
Oh, brilliant. Giro starts as we wanted to go on. Competition, emotion and drama all the way. And I tell you what, a hat off to all of those brave souls decked out in the beautiful pink ponchos. I can tell you Sean picked one of those up at the start as well today. Kept everybody dry. and oblivious to what happened up the front there and all that little bit of excitement. The peloton chasing on behind. We're off for another break here on Eurosport Cycling. Keep your tweets coming in, hashtag Eurosport Cycling, and we'll be back in a minute. Paul O'Connor's written in on hashtag Eurosport Cycling. We want all your tweets, by the way. Question for you, Sean, from Paul. Is it true that you never wore winter gloves, only fingerless ones, or is that a bit of an urban legend?
That is certainly not true. A lot of the time in the races, and of course, you know, when you do the early season classics, the temperatures are so low, you know, 2, 3 degrees, 4 degrees in rain. You're out there for, you know, 5 or 6 hours. Today we're seeing it's 14 degrees and the riders still have, you know, some of them out wearing the winter gloves, but I certainly was a one who wore the winter gloves in the cold conditions. And that's the thing I think a lot of riders say when it was raining or when it was cold. I really, you know, I loved that. I didn't really love it, I just performed well in it, and I think that was my advantage.
I think we heard the same thing from Vincenzo Nibali as well last year on the Giro d'Italia. Doesn't particularly enjoy riding in rain, but just does well in it. Simon Spilak as well on the Tour de Romandie had the same question posted to him, because 2 years running, riding up the mountain with Chris Froome in the wind, the rain, and of course the horrible conditions. And again, just saying, no, my body just supports it better. A couple of people asking us as well, Sean, and you in particular, after Dan Martin went yesterday, has that revised your podium ideas for the end of this race?
No, I don't think it's changed a lot in the podium. Of course, Dan Martin, we were hoping that he would be up there in the final classification, the general classification, and I think he, you know, he would have been certainly in the top 5. I think the way the form was going. Now we'll never know how well he could have done, how good he would be in the final week of this Giro. Yeah, it's a one less for the general classification, but I don't think it changes, you know, the guys who are going to be up here at all.
Well, despite the wind and the rain, Northern Ireland looking absolutely spectacular on the top here, albeit with a few problems trying to get through that gate. I wonder if anybody's gone down. Yes, we've had a couple of riders with a bit of a problem. It's one of the Androni riders who has a problem. On the left, Katusha involved, and as well a clash of back wheel, the chain coming off there for the Europe car rider. The barrier's very, very thin going up to that, and I think the peloton just a bit bunched up going into the end there, Sean.
Yes, and they're very much grouped as well. They're going quite slow up this one, so the moment it slows up and the width of the road, as we can see, is reduced here, they get tangled in each other.
Big Bjorn Tural, son of Didi, riding for Europe car. Not a great part of the day for him, but plenty of time to go, plenty of distance to go as we see the Venezuelan SAG, and of course the Croatian support as well on the road, the Irish flag as well. This is how it happened, and again it can get like that in this part where there's not much happening at the back in the peloton. Of course, the barriers were out on the road there. Everything just got narrow all of a sudden, and problems they weren't expecting.
Yes, well, I think the main problem being that I'm not going at a fast enough rate to stretch out the peloton a bit. Very much grouped there together, and you know, when the road did reduce the width of the road, some problems for the riders.
Not too many problems for the breakaway at the minute. 86.1 kilometres to go. Cialinghi, Alme, Romero and Fedi. Alme is the rider at the front, riding for Lotto. There's a birthday in the Lotto camp today, by the way. Must say proficiat to Tim Wellens. Happy birthday to him. From a great cycling family as well. Dad has a cycling shop, so the Belgian commentators were telling us. Up onto Cushendall Road. And a bit of information there about the Glens. Again, I bet it looked a little more spectacular last week, even though it's a pretty stunning sight, even in the rain.
Yes, it did. Luckily, last week in the morning it was wet conditions, but it dried up very quickly and it made a nice day. Certainly much better than they're getting today here, which you know, the rain is coming down. We can see a lot of surface water here, and not nice, but unfortunately if we had got sunshine, it would be so much spectacular.
Marco Bandiera of Androni Giocattoli behind the car of Gianni Savio's team. Now, I want to mention Gianni Savio again because he was slapped with a 200 Swiss franc fine yesterday. Mechanical problem on the way for Orica Green Edge as well. Gianni Savio, 200 Swiss franc fine yesterday, so that next new suit I think will have to wait. All of his team, by the way, also fined 100 Swiss francs each. The official explanation for breaching provisions concerning warming up during the race. So not behaving too well according to the rules yesterday, Androni.
No, and that we did see during the first teams out on the road. We see the team coming in here warming up, which wasn't allowed by the regulations, and of course they slapped with a fine.
Expensive day out, 100 Swiss francs each, and then 200 for the boss. Dear, oh dear, oh dear.
The new suit will have to wait for a while.
Exactly. 84.2 k's to go. Inside 5 minutes now, the gap. Orica Green Edge at the front. Remember, just waiting for their rider out the back. We didn't quite catch who it was who was having problems. We think it was Michael Hepburn, and he's the man who's been doing a lot of the work on the front today. Astana riding pretty close to front. There's Enrico Gasparotto, I think it is, with the cap on the left-hand side. He's a man who likes his tradition and likes to doff the traditional cap. Cycling clubs out on the road this morning. You and I walked a couple of miles from our hotel to the start. Such an atmosphere, even under the rain, and they come from all over the island of Ireland. They come from all over Europe. We saw South American flags as well. Super atmosphere. And again, on a Saturday morning, the traditional club run has taken in the Giro d'Italia. Special weekend.
Yes, well, it's a big weekend for cycling in Tuesday. It's all over Ireland, and they have come out in great numbers. I think as we go on the stage here, we will see more and more on the final 40-50 kilometres of this run today. Unfortunately, the weather conditions, it's not nice out there for the spectators to be hanging on the mountains, and I'm not surprised on the GPM that we see there. Not too many people hanging around. I think as we go further into the stage, I think there will be big numbers.
James Mappin asking on Twitter why the fines are dished out in Swiss francs. Of course, the UCI, like many of the governing bodies, thanks to the favourable tax laws that are in Switzerland, are based there. So hence the reason that the fines are given in Swiss currency. Well, remember, just like James, you can ask your questions on Twitter. Get them over hashtag Eurosport Cycling or at RobHatchTV or both, and we'll get your questions across to Sean Kelly here in the commentary box. Canadian flag will be waving very proudly from their son Svein Tuff from British Columbia. He's in pink today, a special day for him, and we'll continue talking about that day in just a minute here on Eurosport Cycling. Stage 2 of the 97th Giro d'Italia here in Northern Ireland. 218 kilometres along the Causeway coastal route. We've taken in the 40,000 or so stone blocks that make up the spectacular Giant's Causeway, and the crowd have made it a pretty spectacular welcome to this Giro as well. There's pink absolutely everywhere. Now, Belfast really reminds me of the small Italian villages in the way that they've adopted the Giro d'Italia. You go to the big cities, similar to the size of Belfast when you're on the Italian mainland, and they're not too bothered about the Giro. They're used to it coming each and every year, but it's when you go to the small towns that aren't used to the race visiting. Everywhere's decked out in pink. You see pink cakes baked in the bakery. Kids are off school wearing pink. Grandmas and granddads desperate to try and get their shopping done, moaning and complaining because the barriers are everywhere. And we've seen a similar sort of welcome an atmosphere in Belfast this week, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And today we're managing to see it spread to the entire province of Antrim, County Antrim, for today's race. The gap is back up to 5 minutes and 31. It had briefly gone down below 5 minutes, but we saw a couple of problems in the peloton, as you can see by the natural breaks being taken by the side of the road, that it's pretty much still nice and calm. Garmin still having one or two men up the front controlling things. And again, it's not just the sprinters who are going to be in the front today, Sean. It's going to get very nervous towards the end, because all of the GC guys, and we've seen in particular Astana on the left-hand side, Scarponi and Aru, they all want to stay out of trouble.
Certainly all the general classification men want to stay out of trouble, and what you've got to do in that situation, right close to the front, meaning in the top 25, 30 riders. And with the conditions, it's more so you need to do that today, because you never know what would happen. A crash, as we have seen, there's been a number of them, but if they start to push on and they get a section where there's a little bit of side wind, well, then the peloton could start to split, and difficult to rectify much more difficult than in the dry conditions. So I think the general classification men are going to stay close to the front, and as we get close to the finish, well, everybody will be trying to keep their general classification men, also the sprinters, up in the front, and that will call for a very, very nervous final.
Cycling fans of the world on the roads of Waterfoot in Northern Ireland. Beautiful to see the breakaway rolling through. Jeffrey Romero is the man pulling them through. We saw one of his teammates there, Yalinson Pantano Gomez, attempting to try and eat his lunch, but couldn't quite find his lunch in the back of his jersey. There's Sander Almey rolling through. You talked about a birthday amongst the Lotto Belisol team. There's another birthday as well, 29-year-old Mauro Finetto from Verona, and the Neri Sottoli team celebrating today as well. More problems, a back wheel change required for one of the Lotto riders, and in fact it's the Lotto leader, Maxime Montfort. Already 134 down on the leader, and Montfort's come here to ride for GC this year. What's a realistic aim for the Belgian team? It's not the strongest team. Is he looking at a top 10 or a top 20?
Well, I think a top 10 he would be hoping. We've seen him before in the Vuelta, where Maxime Montfort has finished in the top 10. So when you look at the team here from Lotto Belisol, they will be hoping that he can get a place in the top 10. But I think stage wins, we will see Lotto getting into the breakaways as we settle into this race. We have already won in it today, but when we get to a situation where the riders are 10 minutes plus down in general classification, then there's a possibility of the break staying away, and I think Lotto will be very much present in those breakaways further on in this Giro.
Into Cushendall, the home of the Halt of the Glens Festival, and home of some pretty fanatical Giro fans. Benetton a little more stretched out at the moment. Now, with 78 kilometres to go, Sean, just imagine you're sitting nice and warm with the heating on in the car behind. Hands on the radio. What are you saying to your riders if you want to reel this in? When do you want to bring this break back? And having looked at the final few kilometres with these roads a little wet, at the minute it's not raining at the finish line here in Belfast, but are there any areas that they want to be careful of? And of course, how soon do they want to bring this break back?
Well, I think they will try and leave the breakaway hang out as long as possible. The sprinters teams, will want to do that because it will calm situation down, and it's easier to control it in that case. And they will make the calculation. But again, with the wet conditions and that, they'll be concerned maybe that to get them back in the end, it might not be as easy if you had real good dry conditions, because you can put a number of your team on the front here to get organised. Not as easy with the wet roads, but they will certainly try and leave them hang out there until 15-20 kilometres to go, and that is the norm we see at this point in the race.
Well, those of you a little worried maybe about the fast finale on wet roads, better news is coming in from Carrickfergus, where Callum Baxter and a few other people are writing to us on Twitter and saying, well, the sun is out, the roads are bone dry. And again, here at the finish, the road's still a little slippery from earlier rain in Belfast, but it's drying out. We've got the odd patch of blue skies to look out the window of the commentary box, and certainly a much better picture than what we're seeing on our screen. So, if it does come to a sprint and everybody's together, we talked about Marcel Kittel, but who else is there? What about David Apollonia of Age d'Auxerre? Belletti is here for Androni. Belkin, not really a big man to go for it, but Jetse Bol is probably the quickest in their team. Roberto Ferrari will be expected to surf the wheels as he usually does. Kenny de Haas maybe for Lotto. Tyler Farrow we mentioned briefly for Garmin. Nasser Bouhanni, he's going to be a man, and a real big man to challenge Marcel Kittel, you feel. Edwin Avila is a former track champion for Colombia, quick man as well. Francesco Chicchi, well, can he stay upright in the final few kilometres? Well, he'll be hoping to do for Neri Sottoli. Fran Bentoso is decent at getting wins in the Giro d'Italia. He's had one at least on the last couple of appearances for him, and remember, he even beat Mark Cavendish a couple of years ago in this race down into Fuji Terme as well. Michael Matthews we've mentioned, Ben Swift the Yorkshireman, who's on superb form for Team Sky, and in the Trek team they've got a couple of candidates, Giacomo Nizzolo, Boy Van Poppel. Now, Sean Kelly, who for you is the man that stands out that's going to make the biggest challenge for Marcel Kittel?
Well, it's a difficult one because starting out in the race, we haven't seen the riders how they're performing, and when you get the a day, 2 days into the race, well, then you can see the results of the stage, for example, today. So going forward in tomorrow, you can say, well, that guy must be starting this race quite well. But, you know, there's so many of them there. It's going to be an interesting one. I would hate to say who's the one who will challenge Marcel Kittel, but it's going to be a big ask, you know, to try and take on Kittel and beat him for this stage victory today.
I'd be interested to see how Nasser Bouhanni is, because Française des Jeux have come with a team that's not really concentrating on the overall. They want a top 10, top 15 place, as they said in their pre-race declarations to the press. But Nasser Bouhanni, the former French champion, he had several second and third places on this race last year to Mark Cavendish. He sprinted very, very well in the opening few stages. And he's got a couple of experienced men to orchestrate the sprint train towards the end of the race. The likes of Sebastian Chavanel, who's a quick man, and of course the man who used to work for Garmin, Muriel Fischer, the former Brazilian champion. He's got experience around that raw talent of being one of the fastest Frenchmen on the road.
Yes, and well, Bouhanni is a one who he's not afraid in the sprint. We've seen him, you know, he doesn't back off at all. And he has a few riders there who should be able to look after him quite late into the final, and he can also follow the other sprinters. So if there's a real big train, for example, with Giant Shimano, Marcel Kittel, well, then he can just get on that into that train, and this final corner, you know, he can really go hard into the corners in the wet conditions. He's one of the sprinters who have no fear whatsoever, so I'd not be surprised if he is one of the guys who could challenge for the stage victory today.
Well, he sees himself as a bit of an amateur boxer as well, doesn't he, Nasser Bouhanni? He certainly doesn't have any fear, and he'll have even less after I think he finished Mike Tyson's autobiography, didn't he, when he was at Paris-Nice? So he'll be picking up a few tips for the elbow movements in the peloton, certainly when we get up to the end. It's interesting how sprinting's changed, isn't it? I mean, our colleague at Eurosport, Matt Stevens, wrote a fantastic little piece in the latest Rouleur magazine talking about the evolution of a sprint change. And of course, you're in your early part of your career a sprinter as well, Sean. Having seen the evolution and the way that Mario Cipollini certainly changed things massively during the 90s and the early part of the last decade as well, how is sprinting different now than when it was in your day?
Well, I think the sprint train, that is the big change. And, you know, you have teams in the past, like with Mario Cipollini, where the team was 100% behind Cipollini for the stage victories. And that has made the race, you know, very fast in the end. I think it's definitely made it much safer, because the way all the riders now are much fitter compared to 25 years ago. If there were no sprint train, well, then there would be chaos in the end, because there'd be so many riders fighting to be in that top 25 places of the peloton. With a big sprint train and a big team who can, you know, really put it on, Giant Shimano will be the one here, I think, in the final. That makes it safer, because when you stretch the peloton out, there's a bit more room there, and it's certainly much safer in the final 15-20 kilometres.
Giant starting to commit the man to the front of the bunch now, so they're starting to think about the finale. 73.5 kilometres to go. Of course, you talk about that change in the way sprinting has gone. It's almost a military style formation now for the sprint trains. Very, very well drilled. A lot of drills do go on in training and at the training camps. These guys themselves have worked well together today. Cilinki, Arme, Romero and Ferri. Road's still fairly wet where we are, just left the town of Waterfoot. Off to Glenareth next. Then we'll go through Glenarm, Ballygally, Larne, Knocknaguilla, Carrickfergus, through White Abbey with 8 kilometres to go. And then back into the Northern Irish capital, Belfast. The gap at the minute, 4 minutes and 31 seconds. Tinkoff Saxo. Well, we saw Mr. Tinkoff this morning, didn't he? Hiding away in our hotel, present and enjoying himself, and he didn't seem to be too bothered about being recognised, did he? Strolling about with a big Tinkoff cap on and a huge Giro d'Italia shirt. He was enjoying himself. He
certainly was enjoying himself, very relaxed, and you know, you would not reckon that he has one of the big teams in this race, totally chilled out, on casually walking down to the start area there, and you wouldn't take him as an owner of a pro tour team.
I wonder why he wasn't staying in the most expensive suite in Belfast as well. Everything booked up here, and even Mr. Tinkoff required to stay with us lay people. 72.2 kilometres to go. You're watching the Giro d'Italia here on Eurosport. We're off for a quick commercial break, but don't go away. More from Sean and myself, and more importantly, the riders, in just a moment. Pink fever, a wave of pink fever, quite literally, has reached Northern Ireland. I know Andy Schleck likes to go fishing. He's not riding. That's not him, is it, in the pink jersey? Meanwhile, we've had a problem. A couple of problems for a few of the riders in terms of mechanicals. One of those was Andre Cardoso of Garmin whilst we're away. Orica Green Edge with a couple of giant riders still riding on the front. Great water skiing effort from the man in the Maglia Rosa there. Lifeboat just in case things don't go correct. And Française des Jeux, they've been hiding away. We talked briefly about Nasser Bouhanni before we went to the break. Interesting to know if any of you guys at home, wherever you're watching, remember you can also watch on Eurosport Player on the go, on your mobiles and computers and tablets. Interesting to know if you can tweet us to see if you think anybody can beat Marcel Kittel today. Nasser Bouhanni being one of the big contenders. Well, we've been informed that Alessandro Petacchi might not be having sprinting as a priority today. Of course, Rigoberto Urán having such a good result yesterday, the top placed really, just a couple of seconds ahead of Cadel Evans as the big GC contenders. And, you know, the story reportedly from the Omega Pharma Quick Step camp is that they're trying to keep Rigo safe. Is that a bit of lie-telling going on there? Surely he's going to have a go if he's in the right position.
Well, you would expect Petacchi to have a go with the team they've got as well. You know, they have a lot of real powerful riders who can prepare the sprint so well. For Rigoberto Urán, I think there's enough riders there just to look after him in the end. I think maybe Petacchi is just not prepared to have a go here with the conditions, and they're just using that and saying it's all for Rigoberto Urán.
We'll see. Urán, remember, second place last year on the Giro d'Italia. Orica Green Edge having a day with the wind on their faces at the front. And we saw a bit of a glimpse there before of Enrico Gasparotto. I had a few tweets saying, well, what about Gasparotto for a sprinter? Well, I think on these flat days, Gasparotto's sprinting days are over, aren't they? They've certainly got maybe the intermediate, medium, mountain and hilly stages for Gasparotto to have a go at, but Astana, I think, looking at them as the team, they'll all be behind just keeping the GC man safe, won't they?
Well, I think Gasparotto is the one who we could see later in the races again when we get the medium mountain stages. Certainly some of the uphill finishes, not the big mountaintop finishes, but the ones, you know, who are undulating in the final kilometres. This big sprint today, it's really for the flat men, the big powerful guys, and I don't think Gasparotto is at that level.
Well, one man we haven't mentioned too much, and of course I'm being very, very kindly reminded of it as well, is Elia Viviani, who was so good in Turkey the other week. Actually beat Mark Cavendish on a couple of stages. He's a man who, a bit like Ben Swift, who's had a couple of injury problems, has spent his time juggling the track and of course the road. But Viviani, when he's ridden consistently on the road, has been consistently quick, and it sounds as though he's coming into a bit of a form coming into this Giro d'Italia, which of course, being an Italian rider, is perfect timing for him.
Yes, again, he's a one, you know, can put up some great sprints, and if he is on real good form, he could cause a little bit of problems for the team of Marcel Kittel, and maybe for Kittel himself. And this final corner, this is going to be very important. I mentioned a bit earlier, my apologies, I said 400 metres, but it's quite a bit shorter than that. It's only 300 metres from the final corner. So, you know, it's going to be a big fight to get a position coming into that final corner. If you can, you know, get into that, maybe in second place, I think would be the perfect position to be in. And if you can do that, well, then you're always in with a good chance. And you never know. Kittel has a big, you know, a big team, a big lead-out team, but if he doesn't get it right into the final corner, well, then the other guys could be very much in with a shout.
Well, that's the key to it, isn't it? Of course, you can practice lead-outs all you want on straight, nice, flat roads, but the last corner really is a big 90-degree swing, isn't it? The road is fairly nice and wide, but again, in going into that last corner, are we going to see one or two men still in front, or are we just going to see the sprinters themselves going from a longer way out, Sean?
Well, I think if you have a train and you have two teammates in front, third position would be perfect, because then you can allow them to take you out of the corner, and they're making the sprint for you. But if it's rival sprinters who are in the front, and there's 4 or 5 of the top sprinters in there, well, then if you can get second position into the corner, I think it will be the best one. But it will be interesting to see, will Giant Shimano be able to control the situation and take it all the way into that final corner?
José Herrada there, brother of the current Spanish road champion Jesus Herrada. Jesus Herrada, winner of the Best Young Riders white jersey last week in the Tour de Romandie. Française des Jeux just sending a few of their riders close to the front. They're in the white but royal blue rain jackets, just on the right side of your picture, quite deep there. But there's the pink jersey. It's such a shame, really. Force feign tough that he can't really show off the pink jersey today. No pink rain jacket for him. Four minutes and 42. A few farm animals who haven't suffered at the hands of anything who's tried to rub pink dye into them this week. We've seen pink horses, pink sheep. Well, those cows got away with it, though. Beautiful, stunning area of the country. And the Northern Irish Tourist Board very, very keen to promote this. And they might be slightly disappointed by the weather, but again, the views still do, nevertheless, look pretty spectacular. As I said yesterday, £3 million spent to bring the big start, as they called it, the Grande Partenza, to Northern Ireland. But of course, the facts and figures people, the number crunchers, all reckon that plenty of money has already been made in the other direction as well. It's a great promotional tool. In terms of foreign starts in general, Sean, are you a fan of them?
Yes, I think it's good for the globalization of cycling, and we always hear about the UCI, doing making cycling more worldwide. I think it's important that the nations that are in mainland Europe, to promote the sport there, and by bring the Giro here to Ireland, to Belfast, it's very important. And we all know the way biking is in Britain and Ireland. There's just an explosion in leisure cycling, Sportif events. You cannot get into them, in a lot of those events. They're booked out in the matter of hours when they open up the entries. So I think for the sport here in Ireland to have the Giro, it's so important. And it's great for the younger generation, because they will see their heroes here on Irish soil, and I think that's what we need. You look at football, for example, and we have it every weekend on TV. There's so much of the younger generation want to be footballers. I think the Giro will be the same for the cyclists, the up-and-coming younger generation of cyclists. I think is very important. And of course, the Tour of France in Yorkshire this year again, so close to, for everybody they will be able to get over there. I think it's a great thing that we're having those events starting here and in Britain.
Well, we know the unfortunate news about Dan Martin yesterday, but building up to this Giro d'Italia, we talked about the 3 Irish starters, and of course we keep being reminded we must mention Chris Jensen as a fourth half Irishman, as he spent a long time living in Dublin and racing here in the under-16s, I think it was. But all of the guys, Roche, Duignan and Martin, all talked about, certainly Philippe Duignan, who was at that day in 1998 when the Tour de France began. Of course, it was a Tour de France that was remembered for different reasons, because of Festina and everything else. As we say hello to what I think is Luca Paolini. Hard to tell from the back. But anyway, of course, Nicolas Roche has his family cycling connections. But Philippe Duignan was at that day when the Tour de France left Dublin in 1998, and he said that was the reason he got into cycling. So we can see the next generation, as you were saying, Sean, of cycling fans, and perhaps more importantly riders as well, being made by the very presence of this race here in Belfast.
Yes, well, it does help majorly that you have a big tour starting, and the guys who are underage cyclists at the moment, and we see so many of them around yesterday and this morning, the juniors who are the up and coming promising talent here, to see the race starting here, it's just it's just something, a dream for them to be able to see, the riders here and just to get so close to them. And the amazing thing this morning was at the waterfront, you could wander down there between the team buses, the team cars. I was surprised to see that, because when you go to the Tour of France, everywhere is barricaded off and you cannot get in around the team buses very much. Where today it was free for everybody, and we see so many people just wandering around there, close to the buses, seeing the riders going up to sign on. It was a great occasion for everybody.
Conley trying to get the jacket on or off, one or the other. Not easy at pace. In the end, I'm sure we'll get there. The important thing is to stay dry and stay warm. A lot of those neoprene materials now, you can see the intermediate layer he's got on underneath as well, being very, very important over the last 12 months or so. And the reason they stay black is that apparently if you put too many logos on it, loses the important properties of water retention to just the right amount, because we're talking about a few millimeters of neoprene, well, but rather like a wetsuit works, but it doesn't let too much water through to the layers underneath.
Yes, well, we can see there he has got this the layer, and then he's putting on the raincoat again. That tells us that the temperatures are cool out there, and the important thing is, if you do feel you're getting a little bit cold, well, then you have to get your raincoat back on and stay warm, because still with over 60 kilometers to go, if you continue on for another 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, the cold gets into you, and then it's so difficult to warm up. So to make sure that you keep warm at this point in the race, because still a long ways to the finish.
Con Luke welcomes the Giro d'Italia. Big shout out to Bray Wheelers and Snook Cycling as well. A lot of cycling clubs writing in and telling us that they have riders out here on rides today at the Giro d'Italia as well.
Yes, well, I think the club that certainly needs a mention is the Van Ronde club from Cork. We met them on Thursday night when we were coming from the organised dinner by Eurosport. It was 12:15, and these guys, 10, 12, they came around the corner with their lights, and we were wondering what they were doing. And they were from this new club, the Van Ronde club in Cork. They were looking for the Ibis Hotel at 12:20 at night, after cycling all the way from Cork, 426 kilometres.
Conluff awaits the peloton. 4 minutes and 31 seconds the gap between the front of the race and those behind. Still very, very controllable. And you can just see in the distance that the clouds starting to lift slightly as we get on our way back into Belfast. Just as I say that, though, a few umbrellas are being put up outside the commentary box at the finish line, and a few spots of rain begin to fall. So perhaps it's rolling back in. It's not been the greatest weather day, but it has been a beautiful viewing day. We're getting these wonderful shots still, and the clouds sticking to the hills there, making it even more spectacular. 60 kilometers to go. We're racing today for the first, what we think will be a sprint stage, and of course, points taken for winning each stage, Sean. And this year there's been a big change in how the points are dished out. Now, last year Mark Cavendish pulled off what I certainly consider to be perhaps one of the biggest achievements of his career in winning the Giro points jersey. The Giro is a harsh race. It's a horrible race if you're a sprinter. So many mountains to get up and get over even before you can contest the sprints. Cavendish did wonderfully well to win the red jersey, the Maglia Rossa, as they now call it, the points jersey. Used to be, of course, the Maglia Ciclamino, changed colour 2 or 3 years ago, as Conluff welcomes the Giro d'Italia. This time, it has been changed. And we've had stages divided into different groups with different points given out. That's because I think the Giro organisers want to attract more sprinters, Sean.
Yes, well, they want to attract the sprinters, and they want to hold on to the sprinters more so. And by doing that, they have changed the flat stages. There's much more points available at the finish. The top 20 riders, and there's 50 points available for the stage win today. And then the mountain stages, that drops off quite a lot. Where last year, the stages, I think, were equal, mountain stages and flat stages, so it makes it more difficult for the sprinters. They have to try and hold us up over the climbs to get maybe to an intermediate sprint. And Mark Cavendish, chapeau, last year he did a magnificent job getting through to try and win the sprint jersey, and the weather conditions, but talking of that, I think he paid for it in the Tour. I think he wasn't as fresh in the Tour as he would like to be. But again, he went on and he wanted to win the points classification in the Giro, as he has won in the other big tours.
Talking of sprinting, not a bad exhibition being put on there. Several Maglia Rosa wearers. Absolutely wonderful to see. They're putting some pace down. Peloton as well being led by Orica Greenedge and Giant Shimano. So big set of points up for grabs today. Nice from a couple of fellow professionals there, just looking out for each other. One of the Movistar riders, hands up, just signalling the fact that there was a fairly hidden traffic island coming up. It's one of the great things about sports cycling as well. Professionals do look out for each other. They know that it has inherent dangers, and we don't talk about this often, but cycling really is an extreme sport. We saw the evidence of that yesterday.
Yes, well, it's just the understanding, when there's an island in the middle of the road or whatever, an obstruction on the road, they do give the hand signals, and they do that to the very end. Unfortunately, when they're going really fast, sometimes the riders in the front will see it, but the hand signal maybe doesn't come back far enough in the bunch, and that's where we see riders getting into difficulty and crashing into the islands. But normally everybody does warn everybody else in the group that there's something on the road.
Problem for Albert Timmer, looks like a back wheel puncher. Albert Timmer, one of the riders for Giant Shimano. Looking ahead to Marcel Kittel and his lead-out train. He's got Luka Mezgec with him, who we expect to be the sprinter once Kittel, as expected, climbs off after around stage 10 to 12. Tom Velers is a quick man as well. And, of course, plenty of people to work for them. Simon Geskia, who is such a strong rider. And Jörg Preidler, who will be working hard for the team. Front of the peloton now has a Giant jersey at the front. Orica Greenedge there as well. There's Ivan Santoromita, the Italian road champion, with that rather jazzy tricolore helmet on. And a few of the Orica Greenedge riders having some company at the back. A Mega Pharma quick step with Julian Vermont as well. .6 kilometres to go. It's stage 2 of the Giro d'Italia. 218 kilometres today. Northern Ireland being shown off to the world. It was interesting you mentioned Mark Cavendish there and how hard it has been to win that points jersey in the last few years. In fact, Cavendish was the first sprinter to win the points jersey since Daniele Benati all the way back in 2008. Since then, we had Menchov, who of course won the points and the pink jersey back in 2009. Cadel Evans was the red jersey winner in 2010, first year of the red jersey when it came in, replacing the violet or Ciclamino jersey. Scarponi then went on to win it in 2011. Rodriguez as well after that with his podium finish as well. It has been basically won by GC guys for the past 4 years.
Yes, it has. And when you look at the route of Giro the last number of years, it's so difficult. So many mountain stages, and when you see the riders that have been winning, it just tells you that it's so difficult for the sprinters. Not many stages where they can mark up points. Where the situation, I think the change this year is going to change all that, because the sprinters, they can mark up so many points in the flatter stages, and that will compensate then for the mountain stages where they will not get the opportunity to take some points.
More mountains classification points up for grabs further up the road as well. They will come with 23.6 kilometres to go at Knocknaguilla. Do you expect the breakaway still to be out by then, Sean?
Yes, I think looking at the moment, just under the 4 minutes, 56 kilometres to go, and you take Knocknaguilla, 23 kilometres to go. So I think they could hold on out there. They're working very well. There's a bit more urgency on the front of the bunch for the last 10 or 15 kilometres. We can see is starting to stretch out the peloton, and we can see Orica Greenedge on the front. They're up in the pace slightly in the past number of kilometres.
A few soccer fans out there, the football fans. Conlough, where we've just been for, is apparently the birthplace of the current Liverpool Football Club manager, Brendan Rodgers. Now into Glenarm. Famous for its salmon, apparently. St Patrick's Church towers over the village as well. Today, Glenarm turns Italian. Giro d'Italia, that giant pink jersey that's on the hill, just being hidden away by our kilometres to go graphic there. And there is St Patrick's Church down there where the riders whiz past. Again, superb crowds on the side of the road. And that will, of course, continue when we get to Italy. The Giro, the most loved of the 3 Grand Tours, without a doubt. Again, the fans, tifosi as they're known as well, by their Italian name. Very, very passionate about the sport. Glenon Castle. Glenon, apparently meaning Valley of the Army. There's that pink jersey we told you about. I knew the helicopter was in town. 55k's to go then, 4 and 17. So the gap going down, and as you said, Sean, a bit more urgency on the front of the peloton. And again, how much will yesterday's crash condition the amount of nerves that are in the peloton? Will it make everybody a bit more nervous, the GC guys in particular?
No, I don't think yesterday's crash will have any bearing on today, but it's the conditions here. You know, the wet conditions, the early part of the race, that's always worrying for the GC men. And, you know, they know in the final it is going to be very fast. First couple of days, it's really hectic in the final 25-30 kilometres, and you throw in the wet roads here and the running, as we said, you know, there is quite a lot of street furniture in the final, so it will be, you know, nervous times here, and we can see the advantages coming down. Of course, Ulrika Greenedge, 54 kilometres to go. They have to start working out. They have to start upping the pace here, because the advantage, you know, it's quite a good one at the moment, and depending on how strong the breakaway 4 riders are, they could hold out, and it looks like they're going to go on and contest the second GP classification of the day.
Rigoberto Uran of the Megaformer Quickstep now. His first season with the Belgian Super Team, formerly of Team Sky and Kestepan before that. Been doing a lot of training at home in Colombia. And he came back to Europe very, very recently. Just before this race, in fact. 2 stage wins for him in the Giro d'Italia. As we go back to the break, none of which have taken a stage win from this race previously in their careers. But of course, they're all doing a very, very important job for their teams today. Sponsorship exposure and helping control the race. Sander Arme, Andrea Fedi, joined by Jeffrey Romero, and on your picture there, Martin Cialinghi. They're the 4 breakaway boys. They went in the first 20 kilometres of this race. They've had around 6.5 minutes as their maximum gap. At the moment, they're being chased down by a combination of Orica Greenedge, who have both Michael Matthews, a potential stage winner, and, of course, the pink jersey, the Maglia Rosa, of Svein Tuft. Giant Shimano up there as well. They're doing their best to try and get Marcel Kittel in. He'll be wearing pink on the podium at the end of the day, though. A good chance for Orica Greenedge to keep the jersey in the team. But again, if it is somebody who finished fairly high up yesterday with the time bonuses, you would expect them to take the pink jersey today. So the chances of us having a new leader are fairly high.
Well, it is very possible when you see the general classification, although Ulrika Greenedge are in a really strong position. They have to defend the jersey out on the road, but they have Michael Matthews also for the sprint, so that is a bonus, because if you had a team, you know, who had to control the race but no sprinter whatsoever, well then, you know, the opportunity to hold on to it is not anything like Greenedge here. And the other thing is, when you look at, you know, the other sprinters, they're a bit further off, so with Pataki maybe not contesting, as we're hearing, the sprint today, well, you know, it looks like that we could see Ulrika Greenedge holding on to the jersey for another day.
Riders going along the coastal route, the Causeway coastal route. Northern Ireland showing itself off to the world. Cannondale starting to come to the front of the bunch as well, and this is the moment, Sean, when a lot of people start thinking about the work they have to do in the last 50 kilometres, whether it be for a GC man to protect him, keep him out of the wind and rain, keep him upright on his bike and on the right wheels, whether it be for a sprint train to close the gap down to the breakaway or the sprinters themselves. Everybody starts to think now in these last 50 kilometres about what they have to do. Take the bidons, take the food, and perhaps get rid of the gloves and the rain jacket.
Yes, and you have to make the calculation as well. You know, the advantage of the breakaway out front, the distance you are from the finish, and the team of the race leader, they're going to control it. But if they're allowing that breakaway maybe to be a bit too far out, well, then sometimes the sprinters teams have to take it up a bit more earlier than they would like to do, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. The team of Marcel Kittel, they're putting men on the front and upping the pace a bit because they want to be guaranteed they will close this one down in the end.
Oscar Gatto there putting on the fingerless gloves, and that gap really has gone down. 3 minutes and 46. There's been a significant change of pace in the peloton. Good news is there's been a bit of a change of the weather at the finish line as well, because at the moment the rain has ceased, but we're still getting the odd shower. The road's still wet, and I think, given a quick look at them outside the commentary box window, they're going to be wet whatever happens for the arrival now. So there's going to be great care required, and we'll keep our fingers crossed, touch wood, whatever we have to do. But with the pace that they're going to come in, and of course you get the odd sprinter who's going to have to surf the wheels here, the chances of a crash are going to be high as well. 3 minutes and 43. Bike change. And we've had all sorts of problems, mechanical, and a couple of crashes earlier on as well. Time to get some food in, perhaps get some food up to the men they want to contest the finish as well. Chilinghi, Alme, Romero and Ferri still out there at the front. Sander Alme is 28 years of age. Last time he won a race back in 2009. It's hard work at the best of the time carrying the food, but of course when you're trying to get it underneath a rain jacket at the same time as well, it's not easy. There'll be several layers on today.
Yes, with the layers it's always a difficult, and we did see as well earlier with the big gloves, it's so difficult to get the food in. We see after the feed station much earlier in the day there was a lot of riders went for a long ways with the musette on their back, and that's because they're trying to get their food out of the musette into their pockets, and when you have the big winter gloves it's so difficult. And then with the layers also, it's difficult to find the pocket to get the food in.
Nicola Ruffoni we saw there, and there's Alijet Pataki himself riding at the front, taking up a bit of the wind, so perhaps as suggested he might not be going to contest the sprint. He's just in front of the bearded Simon Geschke there. Pataki takes off his rain cape and reveals the neoprene top underneath we were talking about not so long ago. Moment of change for the peloton again, everybody just getting ready. Colombian rider comes to the front, Jeffrey Romero. Another man with no wins in his career. We said he was last racing at Brabantse Pijl. Chilinghi, in the meantime, hasn't raced since Paris-Roubaix. Sander Arme has been fairly decent in the Ardennes Classics. He was doing a lot of work for his team. But again, for Lotto, it's just been one of those years, hasn't it? They've had so many injury problems over the spring. Of course, Greipel being the biggest of those big names, but they're a team that have had such bad luck.
Yes, it hasn't been a good beginning of season, although Greipel had some victories earlier on. But when they came back to the European circuit and the semi-classics, it wasn't a good campaign at all for them. And of course, being a Belgium team, Belgium press, Belgium TV, it's not easy for them when you see the likes of Omega Pharma, Quick-Step, winning some of the semi-classics, winning Paris-Roubaix. Of course, they're going to, judged against the other teams, and not a big good beginning of season in that way for Lotto Belisol.
Be careful what you say about the Belgian commentators. They're sitting next to us, just to the right here. But again, yes, they're very, very critical with their riders. It is, of course, just about the national sport, cycling in Belgium. Certainly in Flanders anyway. Rigoberto Urán, very, very close to the front as well, just on the left-hand side, about 10 to 15 riders back. This, in the meantime, is Jeffrey Romero of the Breakaway, getting a few extra bits of food and bidons. On a day as cold as this today, what sort of things will be drinking, Sean? Maybe getting the hot tea to keep them warm?
Well, I don't think hot tea will be on the menu today because it's not cold enough. That's something when you get the temperatures maybe 2 or 3 degrees in the early Belgium, semi-Belgium classics, when it's really cold. You know, we do see the guys going for tea. Although last year in the Giro, we certainly had the tea on some of the days because
it was Belgian classic weather. That's why
it was worse than Belgium classic weather at times. And out here today, 14 degrees. It will be just a norm where they have the isotonic drinks. I think that's what will be on the menu. And then the food, of course, you know, the energy bars, the energy gels in the very end of the race. And we did see the bananas are still very much on the menu of the riders.
They certainly are. They're one of the sponsors as well, big fruit provider. So they'll be readily available. Into Ballygally we go. The site's named from a castle, as you could see. Apparently haunted, as you can see. Ballygally Castle. BMC. Bit of oil required. Mechanical work as well. And for BMC today, no real sprinters in their team, all about Cadel Evans. We talked about it yesterday, and I think Cadel, in his post-stage declarations, declared himself very, very happy, and he even thought that his team had the legs to do more. Perhaps asking a little bit much of them. They weren't bad at all yesterday.
No, I think it was a good performance yesterday. You know, they finished 7 seconds down on the winners, and it was looked like they were going to struggle a bit at the intermediate checkpoint at the 7 kilometers, but they recovered very well, finished very strongly, and I think, you know, he cannot be disappointed with that performance where you know, they're finishing at 7 seconds off the winners, and sets them in a real good place overall.
46.6 kilometers to go. 3 minutes and 53. And the visibility very much the same as it was. You can see the rattling the wind cape there of Saint Almé. It's not just the rain. Look at the spray kicking up at the front, right in these riders' shades. Shades that are most probably light enhancers today. That sort of doom and gloom. But the excitement is about to begin. In the meantime, we're off for a quick commercial break.